Okay, so this is the second part of the lesson on the role of government in regeneration. Um, and first of all, so obviously the UK government has the power to make decisions affecting development, so via planning laws that are normally responsibility of local council. So, for example, central government may change planning laws affecting house building. So, what we also looked at in the first video. So, for example, they can allow building to take place in green belts or areas of outstanding natural beauty. Now, in recent years, central government has been quite attracted by the potential perceived benefits of fracking because it could add to the UK's uh, gas supply, domestically produced gas supplies, and therefore reduce that need to import gas from elsewhere. Um, what is fracking? You also learned about this in your GCC. Hopefully, I'll put a link there. As you can see, there's a link there, and I'll put that in Google Classroom. And I would like you to watch that video. But in short, it's quite a nice sort of brief, short explanation what it is. So, fracking is the process of drilling down into horizontal layers of shale rock deep underground and then injecting a mixture of water-scented chemicals at high pressure into the shale to fracture it and release gas trapped in the rock, which can then be brought to the surface. We're talking about underground, I mean deep underground, we talk about sort of 3.5 kilometers, that kind of depth. But have a look at the video that's on Google Classroom. Okay, so the decision to allow fracking is important because it improves the UK's what's called energy security. So being less dependent on other countries for its energy needs. The figure here, the map here, is requires some time to look at. So areas in the UK where permission to search for shale gas by fracking has been granted. That's what it shows. Now the key shows you in more detail how it works. So the grey areas, these are areas available for new licenses. That doesn't mean necessarily that there's shale gas there, but new licenses could be issued there. These sort of bluish areas are the areas where shale gas has been sort of identified. So they think there are sort of shale gas reserves here. So you can see there's an area here in Scotland. There's an area sort of in in the north of England, anywhere stretching from sort of um, Lancashire here, Liverpool, Manchester, all the way across towards sort of north of sort of Yorkshire. Um, they're existing. Oh, sorry, I should also highlight this area in the south. So obviously that's where we are. Then those sort of what is it? Sort of orangey, not orangey, whatever yellowish color are existing license areas. So these are areas that have been issued with a license. So as you can see, some areas are where they've identified energy resources, others not yet. So there may well be that companies are looking for shale gas there. And then finally, the green areas are where there are national parks. And looking at where we are, you can see here the South Downs National Park, very close to also covering areas where there's shale gas sort of found or sort of thought to be there, and their existing license areas as well. So, as I just said, several of the areas identified with shale gas reserves are within national parks or areas of outstanding natural beauty. So, some regions in the UK, especially those that have gone through deindustrialization, may actually welcome new jobs provided by fracking. So, if you can think about sort of areas here in the north of England, they have sort of suffered quite badly from deindustrialization. So they may be quite keen to have jobs in the fracking industry. But other regions, such as where we are, there's some much less benefit because actually we there's quite high levels of employment, there's low levels of unemployment, and people are much more concerned about the potential negative impact of fracking, such as, you know, reserves might not be there. For example, there might be quite a lot of disturbances as well. Fracking may cause minor earthquakes. There's also a chance for contamination of groundwater sources as well, but although these risks are considered to be minor, they are still there. So quite often you see local opposition to fracking. Whenever there's a test drilling happening, people are protesting. The other thing is that local residents might actually not that happy about fracking happening because they don't want to see any industrial development near to where they live. That's also known as NIMBYism. So NIMBY stands for not in my backyard. So it's the same with developments such as HS2 or any other development. There are substantial numbers of people that are not happy with these developments because it is happening near to where they live. And obviously that has an impact on, say, their quality of life, the prices of houses maybe, etc. Let's have a look at another area where the government has quite a lot of impact. Deregulation. So in early 1986, there was a minor but actually a very significant news broadcast. It's a nice picture of how the news broadcast looked like in 1986. So it reported that the UK's financial sector was to be also called deregulated. So that decision was during the era of Thatcher's Conservative government, and that actually resulted in a period of massive prosperity for the UK's financial sector and especially London, and helped to transform London into a major world city. So deregulation involves various changes. So first of all, suddenly it was possible for any bank, financial advisor, individual to trade, to buy and sell shares of companies. So you can you can just buy a part of a company and you don't have to go through the London Stock Exchange. So before you had to be a member of the London Stock Exchange and had to be part of that in order to buy and sell shares. So that was important. The other thing was that the government removed any kind of barriers for overseas banks, financial institutions to set up their offices in London. So that allowed lots of banks to move into London and open their regional or their main headquarters there. The other thing was before 1986. If anyone wanted to invest in the UK, they had to seek government approval. That was also no longer needed. So it was possible to move funds in to invest in the UK, to buy things in the UK, to spend money in the UK as foreign direct investment without any restrictions. So as a result, banking, finance, business services sector grew from about 15% of GDP in 1986 to about 30% of gross domestic product now. So almost a doubling of the percentage of GDP. And obviously, the overall size of the economy of the UK has grown substantially as well. So the actual growth has been phenomenal. It also allowed certain parts of London to regenerate, such as the London Docklands, especially sort of Canary Wharf. And if you're going to Canary Wharf, obviously we've seen that lots of financial institutions are there. So a couple of photos there to the before and after kind of situation. So on the left hand side, that's what Canary Wharf looked like before the development of the area. And then on the right hand side, it's sort of a more recent picture. Very similar to the deregulation of the financial sector, when the decision was made to join the European single market in 1992, this was an example of central government decision making, allowing for the free movement of labour within the EU. Now, this is a map of the European single market, as you can see here. And just to note that there are the countries that are a member of the European single market are obviously the countries in the European Union, the 27, but there's also some other countries as well, such as Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and the UK as well. The UK because we're in the transition phase, but these other countries are part of the European single market as well. So the UK's membership allowed people to that sought work, were looking for work, um, allowed people to enter the UK and looking for work here. At the same time, British people were able to move elsewhere in the single market and find work elsewhere. That also, the fact that people were able to come here allowed allowed sort of the country to sort of balance the needs of increasing taxation revenue that was needed to cover the costs of an aging population. So for some people, immigration is quite controversial. It's like a big issue, but in general, it's accepted that in order to have economic growth, you have to expand your economy. Your economy has to expand. In order for that to happen, you have to have an available labor market. So you have to have people available to take up the jobs you create. Okay, I've got some tasks and questions for you here. The first one is similarly to the previous exercise. I would like you to use your notes and the video on fracking, which is available on Google Classroom, to complete a cost-benefit analysis. I also like you to think about what's your own view on fracking. Should the government support it or not? What do you think? Thirdly, why do you think the story of deregulation didn't hit the headlines in 1986? It was covered in a news briefing, but it wasn't sort of on the front pages of all the newspapers. Now the UK has left the EU, but we're still part of the single market. Why is that? And then finally, if the UK would no longer be a member of the single market, how can it ensure there are enough skilled people available to fill the available jobs? Okay, some questions for you to think about, some work to be done as well. So thanks for working through, and we'll discuss it further during the lesson.